Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to bring you live. Hold on. And we're live.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Finance and Infrastructure Committee. First item of business is roll call. Would you be kind enough to do that for us?
Certainly. Certainly. Roll call for the February 10th meeting of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee. Regent Balducci.
Here.
Regent Gray Kemp.
Here.
Regent Jimenez.
Here.
Regent Ryan.
Here.
Regent Santiago. Absence is noted. Chair Balducci, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we move any further, let's do this. Let's do the acceptance of the minutes of the December 8th meeting. I make a motion for acceptance of those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Thank you. On those minutes. Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Before we move any further, we have two action items, 4 information items. I'd like to make a motion to move the naming opportunity to Gateway Community College to be the next item for discussion, basically because Dr. Brown is here. I'd like to give him an opportunity to speak on this issue and for us to discuss it and then move it along. So is there, I'd like to put that in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you for a second. Any discussion for or against this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move the naming opportunity to Gateway Community College to the forefront. I have not an issue with this gift at all, Dr. Brown. I think it's a great opportunity, and it's going for a great counseling center and wellness center at your school. But as you may be aware of, we have just passed an entire new resolution dealing with recognition and naming of facilities and academic programs. And that really takes place or takes effect officially for especially the larger contributions on the 12th of March of this year. So we are kind of preempting that a little bit, but this is a smaller naming, and so it may or may not fall under this. But I just want to be certain that we're moving in the right direction. And although I think yours is a wonderful, easy one for us to do, I want to use that just to step forward to say that all naming opportunities, according to this resolution, are in the hands of the Board of Regents. They do all of it, and it goes through the process and procedures for the large namings and what is necessary to do that type of thing. The other thing it does, though, near the bottom, it says, items not covered, smaller items in facilities such as labs, classrooms, practice rooms, lecture halls, minor landscaping features such as trees, benches, sidewalks, etc., can fall under the purview of the president of the system, who would then, unless he had a question about it, be able to do those small namings, such as the one we're going to do for Gateway today, Dr. Brown, on his own, with recognition, of course, to making recognition known to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Regents. But that being said, I think this, for me anyway, I think this clarifies where we are. As we move forward, it will become more complicated only in the sense of the reporting and work that had to be done. And by the way, your folks did a great job, I think, in coming up with reasons, et cetera, for the naming of this wellness center and counseling center at your school. But why don't you give us a couple of brief comments about it and what your thoughts are, and then we will just, since it's information, since it's already done, just so that we can move this along and you can be on your way. But I thank you for your time and being more or less, at least for me and this committee, the experimental naming under our, or preempting our new language resolution dealing with namings of facilities.
Thank you, Regent Balducci, and thanks to all of the regents for your time this morning. As you said, my folks did a tremendous job getting the information together in the packet to the board. Especially want to offer just a huge amount of thanks to Lindy, who has been connected with, involved with the college for many years. And really, and this is going to be a common theme whenever I talk about this, has made a huge investment in the work of our college, a long-term investment. She believes in us. She believes in our work. And I think that her gift is evidence of that. So we thank her for that. Um, I guess I'll go ahead and say you're welcome for kicking the tires on the new process and policy. We're in all the ways that we can and know how to. We're trying to do things in a way that will be in accordance with how things are moving. And yeah, I will admit that there's just a little bit of confusion, and it turns out that in this case, President Chang was the approver. But we're happy, quite frankly, to share this with the entire board and welcome your comments and your feedback. So just to be absolutely clear, Lindy gave to the foundation of the college a $250,000 gift that was given. I think it was back in the fall that we were actually in receipt of that. And we wanted to pursue a naming opportunity to honor that gift. And she has a deep interest, longstanding interest in students' needs outside of the classroom, counseling, wellness, wraparound services. And so that's how we came upon that particular area of the college. This is an internal naming opportunity. It is not on the building, which we understand would absolutely come to the board, but at least at this point in time, was in the purview of President Chang to approve. But as I mentioned before, we're happy to share this with anyone and everyone, and welcome comment and feedback and all of that. I would also add that as part of our process, and when I say our, it's really the foundation. As we are looking at gifts and even naming opportunities, and we hope that there will be many more in the future, that the foundation also does its due diligence. Lindy's kind of an easy one. She's a known quantity and all of that, but followed procedures and practices to ensure, the integrity of the gift and to make sure that, quite frankly, I've seen in other places a gift is given and then there are problems with either the gift itself or with the giver. But we followed our process, and did our due diligence before accepting the gift. So we're as pleased as we can be and thankful to Lindy. And does anyone have any questions for me? Is there anything else that you'd like to know?
Any questions for Dr. Brown on this?
Dr. Brown, it's David Jimenez. You mentioned you've done your due diligence. Is there any history about this fund or the naming of this fund that we should be aware with this? I'm just curious about the name of the fund and anything that you can share with us.
No issues. This is a fund that is essentially a separate entity, but of which Lindy is the president. And so particularly in the naming, we wanted to make sure that we included both the name of the fund as well as Lindy, so that, it's not, even with that, we don't want to make it seem that it's a gift from Lindy when it's not. It's the fund that she is president of.
I have to admit, I just Googled the word amour propre and see that the English of it is a sense of one's worth, and it seems to go nicely with the the Counseling and Wellness Center, for whatever that's worth. So thank you. Thank you for giving us some of the background here as to what you're looking to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions by members of the committee? This has already been done because it's a minor naming, and it falls under the purview of the president, Dr. Cheng. So we accept that. We understand what it's been done, and it's so more or less gave us, or at least gave me and our committee, an opportunity to see the direction we're heading, and hopefully we're heading in the right one in future namings, which, by the way, Dr. Brown, may not be as easy as this one. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your explanation. Good luck to you with your new named facility and the Wellness Center for your college.
We appreciate. Okay.
Dr. Brown, I did have a question. It's Pam.
Yes.
Do you have an event scheduled yet for this naming?
That is in process. We do have a date in mind, and we're just needing to coordinate a little bit more before we're ready to do that. But our intention is to both make essentially an announcement, acknowledgement of the gift, and then when we've set up the event, then we'll do that as well. And
you'll let us know so that we can share it with the board.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments for Dr. Brown? Again, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your new facility.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, committee members, then we'll move on to the action items. We have two action items today. The first is the establishment of the community college tuition and fees, which you can find on page 4. With that, I will turn over the explanation to Ben. If you would, Ben, thank you.
I'd be happy to. Thank you very much, Chairman Balducci. So the item that's being presented to you today is for the community colleges only. We have a separate in the past, we've typically, at least during my tenure here over the last several years, we've adopted tuition for all 3 components of our system at the same time. But we are undertaking a more detailed review of affordability and some pricing questions with respect to the universities. That process is ongoing. And so we will be submitting a tuition proposal to the board for the universities and for Charter Oak in March. Some of the issues that we're looking at are how we price out-of-state students and the levels of affordability that we are able to achieve with the discounting practices at the 4 universities. We'll be providing you with some detailed analysis that has gone to inform that, but I wanted to explain why things are a little different. With respect to the community colleges, we believe that there is some significant advantage of having a tuition established early because we think that that is likely to facilitate our efforts to garner additional enrollment for the fall. And so we are acting on that now. That helps us spread some of the work of my office over the months of the spring more effectively. So I appreciate you taking up only the community colleges today. So the community colleges tuition and fee schedule that we are recommending today would be to change the tuition for a full-time, I think this is sort of the easiest number to look at, for a full-time annual cost at the community colleges for both tuition and the community college service fee, which is sort of the major fee charged to all students. The current full-time tuition for a year, this is 2 semesters, is $4,476, and this proposal would change that to $4,700. So an increase of $224 for full-time enrolled student tuition and fees at the community colleges. For one credit, if you were to take a 1 credit class, I'm not sure if it exists, but a single credit The price increase is $12 per credit. I want to give you all, this has come to my attention, that historically, the community colleges charge tuition and fees for, based on a specifically adopted schedule, which shows up on page 8 of the packet. It's called Attachment A. You'll see that exact schedule. In fact, if you do the math on that schedule, we provide a slight discount for more credits. So the cost per credit increase for a full-time student is actually slightly under $10. The cost per credit increase is $12 if you're just taking a single class. And that just reflects the historic way that we've charged tuition. There's a sort of a slight discount for taking more classes built into our tuition and fee schedule. We've increased all the tuition and fee levels across the board in order to produce this result. So there are a couple of features that I want to describe about this tuition package, which I think informed the recommendation to you, and which I think are important to keep in mind. First, the tuition and fee level remains well below the maximum Pell Award. The current maximum Pell Grant is $6,495. There is general agreement. My understanding is that there is general bipartisan agreement in Congress, which is unusual to say, but there is apparently a bipartisan support for action to increase the Pell Award again. Currently, it's at $6,495. It's been there for a year. It is up $400 since 2018-19. So it has been growing quickly over the last couple of years. During that time, our tuition has not been growing quickly. We've been flat for 2 years, and there was a small increase 3 years ago. So we believe that the growth in the maximum Pell Grant means that students who rely on the maximum Pell Grant will continue to be able to afford not only tuition and fees, but to have additional funds left over to support books and the cost of attendance. That has been the way that our tuition has landed for some time. We've always been very careful to leave as much room between the maximum Pell Award and our tuition as possible. This continues to do that. Again, tuition and fees have been flat for 3 years, and that is a blessing to our students and has supported our long-term goal of affordability, but also creates some challenges for us financially. Another fact is that we reviewed, several years ago, I provided some information about the percentage of our students for whom we provide financial aid that is equal to or greater than our total tuition and fees. Several years ago, that number was, I believe, 65%. It is currently 71% of aid-seeking students pay nothing for tuition and fees because the combination of PAC and Pell, Roberta Willis, or other institutional aid or other grants fully offset the tuition and fees. An additional 11% have partial coverage based on need. And as of now, PAC alone accounts for about a quarter of our full-time equivalent student body in the community colleges. Obviously, those PAC students pay nothing out of pocket for tuition and fees. And if they're Pell eligible, they even get a supplement to their funding for cost of attendance. In addition, we are, yes.
Can I ask you a question while you're on this topic?
Sure.
So I definitely appreciate the affordability issue. But given that this was flat for 3 years, and given what you just said about the minimum Pell Grant, and I did a quick search for community college tuitions in Massachusetts, which seemed to be in the $6,500 to $7,000 range. Is our increase too too modest here, given our situation, and given the fact that the students who receive Pell Grants would be able to afford a greater tuition cost, given the size of the Pell Grant or the amount of the Pell Grant?
Well, I'm certainly sympathetic to that view, and I understand and would frankly love to have more resources to support the programs at the colleges. I am, and I'm going to get to there will be plenty of discussion about our sort of financial situation for fiscal 23 later in the agenda. Clearly, this I think is the result of a collaborative discussion amongst the leadership of the institutions and of CT State, and some consultation with a few of your colleagues on the board. So this is, clearly the result of us trying to balance the concern you just articulated with the concerns of students who don't want to pay an increase. Now, look, if you're on PACT, you're not going to pay the increase. The state of Connecticut will pay the increase, and frankly, the PACT program is well enough funded to accommodate inflationary increases in the program, and I don't think that's a concern. The real concern is that there are meaningful numbers of students who are not as well served by our financial aid programs. These include part-time students who are not eligible for PACT, non-traditional students who who often receive less financial aid because, if you've been out of school for a little while, and you're working, you may have a higher expected family contribution if you're a young person with some income independent than compared to if you're a member of a family with low income. So there are generally understood to be some pockets of folks who are, just outside of Pell eligibility, who are non-traditional students, who are part-time students, for whom the nominal tuition is a real factor and is an obstacle to them attending. One of the things that we've done in this proposal to try to get at that and to minimize that is that at the same time we're increasing our tuition under this proposal, we would increase our tuition under this proposal. We are also recommending an increase in the set-aside for financial aid. So this proposal increases tuition and fees, on a sort of pro forma basis by about $5 million, just $4.5 million in revenue that we would anticipate garnering from this, of which this proposal would dedicate approximately $2.5 million to institutional financial aid that would be used to address the affordability for those students who have less access to financial aid. So we've tried to find a way to increase revenue, but also to have resources available to address those students who may be adversely harmed by this. This also gives us, by increasing the set aside for financial aid, it gives the enrollment management team at CT State the ability to have new resources to set up some new avenues for helping students that without taking away from some of the existing streams of aid that we provide. So we think growing the universe of student financial assistance is a way to offset that. To your point, though, I am deeply concerned about the finances of the system. We did do an analysis of what it would take to balance our budget, or on a sort of pro forma basis. It's a little early to know, but if we were to try to balance our budget with tuition, it would require increases approaching 50% that would, I think, really adversely affect our affordability. So we're trying to move it in a way that is garners more revenue, but tries to do that without harming our affordability. I hope we've found a good balance, but I am sympathetic to your view.
And we're maintaining the financial aid and set-asides, and a minimum of 15% too, to help those.
No, it goes up to 17. This proposal would, for next year, the policy remains in place that it's 15% minimum, but this says because we're raising tuition this year, for this coming year, we would set aside 17%, which is how we garner that additional funding for student financial assistance. Obviously, that's a decision that we would leave in the hands of the board as part of your spending plan decision-making going forward. But, you know, we thought that that was a way to address some of the concerns about a larger increase in tuition and fees for the community college than we have had for several years.
So, Ben, I take it, I mean, you've said that you're sympathetic to the point of my question, but this is your I mean, just frankly, this increase seems to solve nothing to the extent that we have financial challenges in the community college system. Such a modest increase of a couple $100. I'm not sure it really moves the needle a whole lot. And it would seem to me that the financial set aside that you're creating could be enhanced if the tuition was increased by more to deal with those sort of extreme scenarios that you mentioned wouldn't be covered by the Pell Grant. Or not extreme, but those sort of special. But is this, in the final analysis, you've been living with this and you've spoken with the community college leaders and other stakeholders. This is your recommendation, I take it, notwithstanding some of the points.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I will tell you that it's early in the process. There are, and we have a much larger gap for next year at the community colleges, and for another day we'll talk about the universities too. But we do have some significant budget problems as a result of the loss of enrollment during the pandemic. This does not fully resolve those problems. As I've said, there are 5 ways to close a budget gap in higher education. The first is we can raise tuition. We can use reserves. We can ask for additional subsidy from state government. We can cut costs. These are the things we can do, and we can grow enrollment. It's the last of those 5. They are all probably going to need to be brought to bear to solve the problems that we face. I think there is some concern that I have and that I heard from the CEOs that if we raise tuition too aggressively, that it will harm enrollment, both because some students can't afford it, and also because there would be a perception that it was too expensive, or that it was becoming more expensive and was not as good a value as it might otherwise be. I freely admit that pricing in higher education is very difficult for most of our students and families to understand. The fact that very few students pay the price that we're setting here today because of the financial aid that we offer is very important. But I also understand that, when we spoke to students about this, we spoke to a group of, President Chang and I spoke to a group of student leaders about this, and while some, I think, were comfortable with the increase and felt that it wasn't terribly significant, they thought, well, $200, we really care about the well-being of the institution. We heard that from students, but we also heard that there are lots of students for whom financial aid is not, who do pay the full freight, pay the sticker price, and for those students, increases are problematic, and they're struggling now to pay for it at its current rate, and going up a couple $100 for a full-time student is going to create some level of hardship. I understand that. These are students are suffering inflation throughout the economy that they need to deal with. So this was kind of the level of increase that the CEOs were comfortable with, and I think, look, if we needed to revisit this, there's nothing that prevents the board from ever revisiting tuition decisions. That is certainly something that we, if down the road that was the best approach, I would put it in front of you, and we could certainly have that discussion. But this seemed like the level at which the impact on affordability was small enough that that we could, that the leaders of the campuses felt comfortable going forward.
Thank you, Ben.
You know, yeah, and just to piggyback that for just a second, yes, David, in a moment, let me just finish. I started to say about the 15% set aside, which we did in 15, then Ben chimed in, and I was going to mention also, it's now moved to 17%, which gives us more help for those in need. But what I think Ben's commenting on, and which I agree to, is there's a group of people, it's not a large group, there's a small group that will be paying this $224, but many of them are in stressful situations and determining whether or not they can continue, and I'm sure you understand that, whether they be individuals who are non-traditional students or students who just don't qualify because they work and make enough money just to be outside the reach of being able to garner a Pell Grant or whatever it might be, that's helps those folks in the sense that not going higher, and actually may end up be a deterrent, and may not become, even though it's only $224, easy for me to say, but may not be easy for many of those students out there who will be required to pay this additional tuition increase. David, you had your hand up. I turn it to you. You need to unmute.
Mute it.
It's just a comment on Ben's point about the 5 sources of funding, and in particular, the state component. That brings up the whole issue of full funding for public higher education. And that's, I think, an issue where the board and faculty would be on the same page. That is to say, to what extent are we campaigning with the legislature and with the governor for full funding, and providing a figure which might seem utopian or idealistic to some, but which would be the figure necessary to fully fund both the community colleges and universities. I think that's an issue to which we should return.
Yeah, we're going to discuss that later on, David, if you look on the agenda when we do the budget update and the budget request, which falls under B of our information items, David. So we'll discuss it there. Any other comments by members of the committee on the resolution calling for an increase in tuition, and also the expansion of the tuition financial aid and set aside?
I do have one more comment, and that's on page 5, which is the resolution itself.
Yeah.
The fourth whereas, it says CSCU has been successful in achieving savings in the community colleges through attrition of non-academic positions based on the Students First plan. And I just want to note, just for the sake of information for the members of this committee, that certainly I've received, and it's anecdotal, nonetheless, information that the quantity and quality of services at the community colleges has declined. Now, that may be transitional due to the reorganization that's going on, but nonetheless, that's a fact. And that's a consideration which I think has to be taken into account. Moreover, it has an impact. Yes, money is saved when positions are not replaced and when one person has to do the work of 2 and so forth. But it also has an effect on retirements, and that has a further feedback effect on the quantity and quality of services available both to the students and to the faculty. I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, David.
Can I point out one more item on this schedule?
Yes.
There's one more item that I want to call your attention to. It's shown on page 10 of the agenda. We have, this is a relatively small fee, but I think it's important and interesting to me that we have this year with this tuition fee proposal, we've made essentially no changes to the tier 2 fees, the fees for labs and other things. Those have all been held flat. The one change is that we have unified our student activities fee for full-time students at $20. There were a couple of campuses that had different amounts. One of our goals over this year and recent years and near future years is to try to bring as many features of our system together so that there's one answer. And we've done that with student activities fees. That required us working with individual student government groups at different campuses to approve that. So we're now have a uniform full-time student activities fee, which is a step forward. So.
Okay. Before we vote on this resolution, I just realized I would like to make a technical amendment to the resolution. It would be in the last resolve. I have never seen that before where it says resolve that said. I would just like to strike those two words. If it would be, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. The board reviews and be it further resolved, rate adjustments may be recommended by the board should circumstances warrant. And by the way, that last resolve is very important. It goes back to David's comments about maybe raising tuition higher or doing other things, et cetera. So that's a very critical resolve in this entire resolution. But I don't think we need those two words there. I know it's only technical, and well, you're shaking your head at me, Pam.
No, you're channeling Naomi Cohen, and we'll list this as a friendly grammatical amendment.
Oh, absolutely, friendly as you want to be.
Thank
But
you.
That's why you're chairman. That's why you're chairman of the committee. You get to make those edits.
Yeah, major decisions, right? Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment's adopted. Now the question is on adoption of the resolution for the increase in the community college tuition and fees and set-asides. I would put that in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Joanne. All those, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The resolution is adopted. Thank you very much for that, members. The second item deals with acceptance of the gift of Manchester Community College. We have two people to comment on that. One, of course, is our Keith, who we haven't seen in a while. Hope all is well with you, Keith. Good to see you again. And Dr. Salmon. So, Keith, why don't you begin, and then we'll move it over to Dr. Salmon to comment on this gift.
Good morning, everybody. Manchester Community College has been offered a generous gift donation of 13 portrait oil paintings and 1 sculpture. The donation is offered from Jack Lardis. Mr. Lardis is also the artist, both the donor and the artist. The goal is to enhance the mission of the campus, improve the aesthetic character, and also help the campus understand and have a better understanding, visual understanding of the arts. There are a couple stipulations that come with this donation. One is that much of the art or some of the art be installed in hallways and also in private offices. Where it's on display, it's labeled with Mr. Lardis noted as both the donor and the artist. And if the college should include any of the art in a exhibition, Mr. Lardis needs to be notified and invited. In addition to the CEO of the campus is to write a letter thanking him for the donation. I've included on the resolution a list of each of the painting names and the sculpture and the estimated value. The total is $48,000, and we're asking for the board to approve this donation.
Thank you very much, Keith. Dr. Salva, would you like to comment also, please?
Oh, I don't have any extra information. I just want to say thank you, for accepting, or moving forward to accept this donation. It will be a wonderful opportunity for our students, and also to just make sure we increase the art collection, the permanent art collection that we have here at MCC. So based on the approval of this committee and the BOR, MCC will be happy to accept this donation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other comments on this by members of the committee? Hearing none, I would ask, I'll make the motion of adopting the resolution dealing with the donation of artwork to the Manchester Community College. Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Thank you. Second, no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, the resolution's adopted. Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you, Dr. Salman, for being here and giving your time and helping explain this. And good luck with this new gift to you.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes care of our action items. We had 4 information items. One of them we've already discussed, the naming opportunities for our colleges and universities. So that's going by. So the first one that we have before us is the mid-year projections and budget update. Ben and Melantina will do this. And so I'll start by turning it over to Ben.
Okay, I will introduce Melantina on this. As you know, each year around now, I've had call to look back at previous years' agendas. It's usually in February. It's been in March a few times. I guess things happened, but this year we're on track. We're doing it in February. So this is a process whereby Melantina and her staff get reports from each campus about spending through December 31st, and using all that information and our projections about enrollment and other things allow us to identify how we're doing against our spending plan for the year. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Melantina. She's going to do a quick presentation about where we are budgetarily this year, and then either of us will be happy to take any questions from you all about our current operations.
Good morning. My name is Melantina Pustai. I'm the Director of Budgets and Planning for the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities. And I'm here today to present just about 50 pages and a few slides. So my goal is to highlight only the takeaways for today's meeting. I'm going to share my presentation on the screen.
We'll provide this to all the members as part of the minutes for the.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity, number one, to present our financial projections as submitted by our institutions and to highlight what's standing. As you can see, this page only reflects the changes and the highlights that are in the numbers. For now, all the slides will touch upon what's presented on this page. So I'm going to be moving forward. The first one is a compelling story about our enrollment. As you can see, comparing current projection to FY19, which is pre-pandemic era, our enrollment at universities declined by an additional 16.7%, and the colleges 25%, following a slight increase at Charter Oak. The comparison of current projection to last year that just closed, it's about 7.5% decrease for universities, 5.8% decrease for colleges, and just about 1% decrease for Charter Oak. Current year projection reflect a slight decrease of less than 1%, but mostly the institutions were very conservative with projecting their tuition and fees revenue, assuming prior to the census data that the usual fall decline from semester, for instance, from fall to spring, there is a slight decline that happens year over year. So the actual and the projection for last year and current year was truly impacted by the additional funds that we received from the federal government. The abbreviation for those is HERF and CRF funds. For instance, in FY21 is presented, we receive an additional of $72.4 million, and FY22, we are projecting $86.8 million, although most of it has been spent. There is a balance of about $35 million left at the colleges. And this I'm talking about in particular the institutional portion of the federal funds. In addition, the institutions received another $60.5 million from the state that was passed through. For example, most of those are reimbursement for COVID expenses related to testing costs, cleaning supplies, facilities set up, upgrades to allow for remote learning and IT equipment for wireless. Other were for, there was about $6 million received for public safety and public health costs that were distributed to institutions, and the universities were received about $11.8 million for student refunds, housing, and food to supplement their loss in revenue for the auxiliary services related to those services.
If I could just add in one comment, the additional funds that Melantine is talking about from the CRF, those are not included in our, like when we present our normal P&L to you, that's the general and operating funds. The CRF funds is a separate fund, so that's additional money that we spent that was not part of the overall budget. That's extra revenue and extra expenses. It's one of our grant funds, so it's not reported as part of the general and operating fund statements that you have in front of you now.
Thank you, Ben. That is correct. Those funds are direct expenditures and revenues are directly booked to that grant fund, specific that is it's reconciled with OPM's data. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to move up to one-page summary of all the 50 pages that I was talking about. And our mid-year projections is included in this package. You can see slight changes from the revised budget that was approved in October. For instance, the State appropriation remained flat. Tuition and fee declined for an additional 1.4%, which truly reflects the assumptions that were presented by the institutions that enrollment is expected to decline. The student fees are associated with the tuition, so combined, they're about just about 2%. In particular, the universities were assuming combined, we're assuming 2.2% decline, and the colleges about 2.7.
Valentine, would you just explain the 23.6% on all other revenues under changes? Maybe it's just me, I just can't follow that.
Yes, yes, thank you. The all other revenue truly represents all other activities on campus, for instance, athletic events, all kind of events. And in addition, there were obviously all our financials for the last few years are impacted by the pandemic, and it's truly reflected all other revenue. For instance, Central and Western assume about 700,000 less than budget, and Eastern and Southern about 300 less than budget at mid-year, which it truly reflects what's happening today to restrict the activities on campus. And even though the percent stands out as almost 24%, the dollar change is only $2.3 million.
Okay, thank you. It just didn't look right to me, but I got it now.
Moving on to expenses, there is a story when looking at the salary cost. We have experienced about 220 retirements year to date, beginning July 1st, 2021 to date. In addition, so that's reflected in the salary cost. However, the salary cost rolls out all the personnel line items, which includes the payout. So even though a number of 220 employees retired, the majority, or on average, the payout that is for longevity pay and accumulated leave will be reflected in this number. So which also impacts the fringe benefits. When it comes to fringe benefits, there is a combination of lower rates than originally projected when we put together the budget, and the fact that the retirements carry a higher fringe benefit rate compared to the employees that replaced or refilled some of those positions. What's important to note is that one of the highlights at the beginning of this presentation was talking about the silver tsunami. Currently, we do have a tally of expected additional retirements that express interest, and for our system, that's another 146 employees. So in total, if we account for the employee that expressed retirement to the ones that already retired, current year, we can say that we have about 370 employees. to be retired at the end of the fiscal year. The rest of the institutional aid, I have a separate slide for that. The utilities and all other expenses almost remain flat to the budget. The additional funds are reflected at the bottom under adjustments. We talked about the HERF additional grant fund, but what I would like to point out is that the state did provide another $10 million this year to provide support for adjunct faculty necessary to provide adequate course availability to students at our institutions, primarily due to pandemic and space requirements. If you don't have any more questions, I will move on.
I have one quick
Yes.
question. On page 19 of the agenda handout, it says here the current projections do not include any impact from a CBAC agreement or any possible retroactive payment. Neither the cost of salary increases nor any fringe benefit impacts are reflected on the FY22 mid-year projection. It seems to me that's not realistic. I mean, one could expect that there would be, in fact, certainly over a 2-year period, salary increases and fringe benefits we know go up.
I'd be happy to answer that one, Melantina. While we are aware that CBAC is that there is progress toward a statewide agreement on wages for the contracts that began a year ago. At the time that this information was compiled, we did not have information available on that. We're also trying to be respectful of the negotiating process. So there are, in the discussion item about our legislative ask, I'm going to be presenting you with some estimates of what we believe the aggregate cost of those increases will be. It is a considerable cost, as you say. However, it's largely because of the timing. Any change to fiscal 22 is going to be a retroactive payment. It's not clear to me that it will be provided in fiscal 22. It may, in fact, be provided in fiscal 23, depending on when those agreements are resolved and when we're able to process those payments. So it's, we will be discussing it, but it was premature to include it here. At the time the universities and colleges were preparing these estimates, we didn't even have any particular information about the nature of those raises or changes. We now do, but.
I will be moving to the next slide, which truly represents the percent of our revenue sources as a percent of total. So what stands out, the state support, it's about 54% for our projection. Tuition, it's about 21%. And so are the student fees, following by 18%. Housing and food services at the universities, 7% of this operating revenue total, and all other revenue, 1%. So a decline of 24, close to 25% of 1% of the total stands out. I will be moving on to the expenses. The salary cost and fringe benefits that are about 77%. It's kind of the normal year over year. We know that that's within the range. Institutional financial aid, about 5%. All other expenses remain at 13%, although all other expenses decline slightly in the current year due to other costs that were moved to the grant and covered by the grant, particularly anything related to the COVID-19 or pandemic. But you know, if you think about travel and all other activities, those are reflected in a lower number. For instance, at the universities, it's just about $7.1 million less in the current year when compared to 2019, the year pre-pandemic. So,
If I could just add one thing, Valentina, within all other expenses, even though it is generally going down, the largest piece of that is technology, and that part's growing. So it has gone down in part because of the grant funds, as Valentina pointed out, and the pandemic restrictions. But the cost for maintaining, you know, buying licenses, replacing equipment continues to rise and is a growing part of our OE expenditures this year.
thank you. Thank you for that. If there are no questions, I will be moving to the next slide, which presents the institutional financial aid. This is percent of net tuition. The percent increase from last year at the universities, there is a slight increase in institutional aid set aside. The colleges, although, show a higher percent than they require, 15%, but lower than FY21 actual. The 21 actual reflects an additional $6 million that was used from colleges' reserves for the PACT program, and that stands out. Charter Oak remains flat. The projected unrestricted net assets, UMP, is presented on this slide. What's important to remember is that at the universities, which reflects just about $150 million projected at the end of current fiscal year. $98.5 million, or just about 67% of universities' UMP, are designated reserves for specific projects. Those funds are specifically required within the fund balance guidelines to be set aside at each university's. And the footnote kind of gives an example of those items.
I'd like to add here, I know that this may seem a little confusing, and I agree that I would explain it. The second column in this chart shows accrual entry for HERF funds recognized in 21. I'm sorry to introduce accounting issues here. But when we established the UNP at the end of fiscal 21, based on our audited financial statements, our fiscal 21 audited financial statements included $20 million, you can see there, $20.2 million of federal grant revenue that we had earned in fiscal 21, but that we earned it by sending money to our students as part of the HERF program. We had earned that money in 21. It was recognized in 21. However, it is by budget plan. I mean, it was our plan all along. We have to expend those funds this year, and so you'll see the unrestricted net assets, the reserves of the system essentially went up by $20 million at the end of fiscal 21. But those $20 million were sitting there and planned to be used this year, and were required to use them under the grant before some dates this spring. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that even if we exactly hit our budget and don't have any financial problems this spring, we're still going to see our reserves go down by those $20 million because because of the way the accounting required us to recognize those revenues a year before we plan to spend them, draw them down and spend them.
Boy, that is confusing.
Well, that's why you're on the finance committee. you get to learn about these things.
Wow. So it's 20.2 million.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Valentina, you, any further comments?
She may have one or two more slides, I don't know.
Yeah, I will, this is the last slide, kind of points everything that we discussed and the continued risk that we face. Recapping our discussion. If you have any questions, please let me know.
I have a
Do
question.
we have?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, David. I was going to ask about retirement, but you go right ahead.
You know, Ben, I think I've heard you mention a couple of times that we attribute the enrollment decline to the pandemic. Has that actually been determined to be the cause? Is this something that's happening in our peer institutions in Massachusetts and New York, for example? So that's question one. And question number two is, what are the community leaders doing to tackle that and turn that trend around, if you know?
No, I'd be happy to take that. You know, there is a long-term trend toward declining enrollment in higher education generally, which is most pronounced as you sort of go down the prestige rankings of an institution. So, you know, Harvard has fewer high school graduates to pick from, but they still manage to pick enough to fill their whole class. And as you go further down when you look at state institutions, you know, flagship universities have held up their enrollment pretty well. They're more selective. But as you get to less selective institutions, there is a downward pressure because there are fewer high school graduates, especially in this region, the Northeast region. In like the Southwest, that's not true, but on the East Coast here, there are fewer high school graduates, and so that is definitely producing a headwind. And we'd seen that if you looked at the enrollment between, say, 2010 and 2019, it was going down very gradually. However, the pandemic created drop-offs in enrollment that are, drop-offs in enrollment during the pandemic were much more extreme, and it is difficult to ascribe those to well beyond what you would expect because of the reduced number of high school students. Whether or not the end of the pandemic, if that's really a thing or not, I don't know whether it ever ends, but even the improvement of disease conditions and the relaxation of public health measures like masking and other things, we anticipate will allow our enrollment to rebound, but the experience that we've had suggests that it's not just going to come right back. We have to go back and earn it back following this. Saying it's the result of the pandemic doesn't imply that we believe it will come back on its own. It may come back to some degree on its own, and we hope that's true, but we are certainly undertaking efforts to regain that population. In the community colleges, we are looking to do a number of things. One is the increased financial aid set aside will allow us to create financial aid programs to target populations where we think price sensitivity is a factor. They are also working, I know the new leadership at CT State is working to increase the amount of contact that our recruiting staff have with local high schools. We are requiring our registration and our admission staff to spend time co-located on high school campuses, working with students in a more aggressive way, targeting groups of students who we believe are potential enrollment, areas of enrollment for us. I think there are other efforts being put into place to target students through, who are sort of non-traditional students through workplaces and other means such as that. I do know that the Guided Pathways and with its focus on retention is also intended to help us preserve the students who do come in our door and keep them here through completion at a higher rate, which will increase our enrollment quite considerably. Our normal drop-off is between one fall and the fall the following year is I think our retention rate fall to fall is about 60%, if I'm remembering correctly. So that leaves 40% of those students. If we could keep them, those would go a long way toward improving our enrollment. So we do have a whole bunch of strategies. The universities are looking at some changes in their tuition policy that impact out-of-state students to allow us to do more recruiting more broadly from students who are from other states. Which is one approach. They're also clearly continuing to work to recruit students in Connecticut. There are also some efforts at the universities to identify graduate programs that are in demand that they think they can garner additional enrollment for in-demand graduate programs. So there are a whole series of efforts both on the pricing tuition side and on the academic programs and the recruitment efforts. All three of those areas there are focused on driving enrollment recovery from what we've suffered in the last couple of years.
Yeah, Ben, I just want to make a comment, and I don't think Alice is on any longer, but I would ask, Ben, maybe if you and Chairman Balducci consider talking to President Chang about it. Hearing your point earlier about the 5 key drivers to the university financial system, and hearing about the dramatic decline in enrollment, and the idea being that things will improve, but we don't know for sure how that will improve. I personally, as a board member, would prefer to hear from the leaders of the community colleges what their plan is as we work our way out. I'd rather be hearing about that than having leaders come and present about gifted artwork, frankly, or names. I want to know, what are we doing to hold accountable these leaders of each of these institutions to do what they need to do to increase enrollment at the community college system and at the state university system, given the unprecedented events that have happened over the last 2 years, because that is critical to the well-being and the sustainability of the system. So and I say that without criticizing the presenters that we had, but if we're going to have a leader of a community college, that's to me very important, more important, frankly, than the name of a center. And I know we have our procedures and we have to follow those conventions. And you do a good job, Ben, of sort of talking in the aggregate about what's going on. But I believe it would be good for those leaders to know that the board wants to know, what are they going to do to turn this trend around as we hopefully come out of this pandemic. So for what that's worth, I just offer it as hopefully constructive thoughts.
It is. Go ahead.
I was just going to comment, it is going to be difficult. Turning it around is going to be difficult, David, because the numbers I've seen, not just in the New England area, Connecticut, New England, but across the country, is that there are fewer students graduating from high schools than there have been in the past. Diminishing numbers just because people aren't having the number of children that they've had in the past. That's been exacerbated is the word I'm looking for, by the pandemic, which also drove, on top of those, the fewer numbers coming out of schools, the pandemic has driven it even further down as far as numbers that we've been getting, especially in the community college areas where we usually see higher numbers. And the universities have also been now a major problem with the percentage drops. And one of the big revenue sources, of course, is room and board, and that has really dropped off, as you know, in the past. So your idea isn't a bad one, but I think part of it is uncontrollable. One, the pandemic, and two, the numbers of students graduating from high schools and then moving on to whether it be community colleges or universities.
Yeah, I will tell you, David, that President Chang is keenly focused on this and has established some groups of campus leaders who are working on enrollment management questions now. And so I think that your request for feedback to the board on that question is timely, and I will share that with him. We are, as Chairman Balducci, and I don't mean this as an excuse, because it's our job to restore the enrollment and to establish institutions that can serve that enrollment. But we are sort of swimming in a tide of economic factors that we need to deal with. I am concerned that unlike previous sort of business cycles where a recession comes that produces low employment, like higher unemployment, and that tends to drive more students back to school. You know, we can't get a good time to go back and retool, get new skills, get a new degree, what have you. That has not happened now, and we actually are in a position, I suspect, where high inflation coupled with availability of higher paid jobs at the lower end of the economics, you know, low paid jobs are better now than they were in the past, and they're more available. It's not hard to get $20 an hour working for Amazon or UPS these days, or whoever it is that you're choosing to work with, and that is for students who are facing increases in rents, increases in the cost to feed their family. It is very compelling to work harder at paid work and defer your higher education. And for like the community college population, that's a very salient choice for many of our students. So we need to find ways. Affordability is part of it. You know, reaching out to those folks and establishing the value of what we offer. Even though the value of a job is, you know, it's quite clear to the people who hold it. So we're struggling with that, and I know that there are folks more knowledgeable about it than I am. I will pass your message back to President Chang, and I expect we'll be able to present to you on this subject shortly.
I have no doubt that President Chang is on it, and I'm not surprised to hear he's got a task force of sorts looking at this. I do think that the board should be aware of it, aware of what the reality, you know, as Chairman Balducci said, there are some demographic shifts that can't be avoided. Whatever the challenge is and whatever we're doing, I believe that the board should be fully engaged on that, and that the people who are accountable for enrollment know that the board is engaged on that issue. So that I've taken a lot of time, but thank you for allowing me to go on.
Chair Balducci, it's Pam. I just got a text. Dr. Pritchard is watching on YouTube, and she said to share with you that she heard the issues and will adjust plans for presentations.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Other comments, Ben or Melantina, on this area of projections? Okay, thank you then. If not, we'll move on to the next information item, which is legislative budget requests. Ben, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you very much. We are in the process of developing, we've developed estimates of what we believe the shortfall that we will face next year across the system are going to be. I will acknowledge that it is very challenging to do that given our uncertainty about spending levels, enrollment levels, et cetera. So there are a great number of factors. We have not yet developed a budget or spending plan for next year. But based on our current levels of enrollment and tuition, including the tuition package that was acted on by this committee today, and based on what we know about state assistance, we're still trying to fit the governor's budget proposal into this, but we're beginning to do that. We believe that there will remain quite considerable shortfalls despite the generous package that the governor put on the table. It will not be sufficient to allow us to operate on our current basis next year. Some of the factors that are driving that, I'd like to point out to you. First of all, we believe that next year there's a 27th payroll. Every 10 years, the state, on a budgetary basis, needs to fund a 27th payroll because some years that happens. It happens every 10 years. It seems to always happen in years that end in 3. So next year there will be a 27th payroll. That will cost us $23 million in PS costs. The CBAC agreement, which is has been concluded, but only the first step. The way that this works is that the coalition has come to terms for individual collective bargaining agreements, and then it goes over to what they call the local tables, which is where it is now. So we have been given a framework by the legislature, no, not by the legislature, by the state Office of Labor Relations, that is based on their discussions with CBAC, and we are now attempting to use that to conclude our outstanding collective bargaining agreements. We believe that, and I have been asked not to share the specific details of that agreement, although I anticipate being able to do that with you all shortly. I am being deferential to the state's Office of Labor Relations. However, I will tell you how much it's going to cost, and that we believe that the agreement with CBAC will cost salary and fringe a total of $78 million for fiscal 22 for the current year, for us to pay retroactive raises and other features of that to our unionized employees this year will cost $78 million. That includes fringe. And that next year it will cost, just on PS, approximately $40 million. And there will be about $40 million in associated fringe because of both the 27th payroll and the additional wages that we would pay under the CBAC agreement. In addition to those, so CBAC is quite costly. In addition, we are, we've seen the pandemic enrollment drop. I just quantified what the difference, how much we've lost in tuition and fees since 2019, the last year pre-pandemic, and the total amount of tuition and fees that we've lost since before the pandemic is $84 million across the entire system of colleges and universities. So we must balance our budget, even though our operating revenue from tuition fees has gone down by $84 million. That's another way of looking at the loss of the federal funds. The reason we've been able to operate with these lower tuition fee revenues in recent years is because of the federal funds. Those are available to us this year, but expire this spring and will not be available next year. Although they just announced a small additional pot, which we'll apply for, maybe we'll get a little help next year, but certainly not at the scale that they're helping us this year. In addition, we have other budget shortfalls. For instance, during the pandemic, we've paid 2 years of raises from the 2017 CBAC agreement. Those raises amount to, I know that number. The cost of our raises from the prior CBAC agreement that we absorbed over the last 2 years is I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right, is considerable at about $60 million. So we have a number of significant issues that have built into our that are built into our operations that we're going to need to accommodate next year, and those combination of events, the loss of revenue from enrollment, the loss of the federal revenue that we have received as a backfill there, the increased cost from labor costs, both from the prior agreement and also from this new agreement that we have, the 27th payroll. Again, those leave us with a budget hole for 2023, in my opinion, of approximately $250 million across the system. In addition, there is a hole for the current year as a result of the retroactive payments, like I said, of about $80 million. So those costs are going to be significantly offset by the package of funding that the governor has proposed. We're trying to line all that up exactly so that we can be very clear as to where he has proposed funding to support. I mean, it's all over the map because the governor's budget includes general fund authorizations. It includes use of carry forward funds from the prior year. It includes use of federal emergency funds that they have. We're trying to make sure that we have it all squared away where that all qualifies, and we will then be approaching the legislature to help make up the difference between the whole budget holes that we face and that number. I will tell you that we met with the presidents of the bargaining units on Tuesday and gave them our most current estimates of what we thought the budget shortfall was going to be, and indicated that we would be asking the legislature for those funds. They have agreed to work with us and to ask for that, to join us in asking for the support for these funds, a significant portion of which is to fund the labor agreement that we hopefully will achieve with all of our bargaining units over the next several weeks. So we have a big legislative ask ahead of us. I anticipate that by the time the full board meeting occurs in 2 weeks or so, that we will have a detailed evaluation completed of all the governor's proposals and how those line up against the shortfalls I've just identified for you orally, and that the delta, which will be a large number with 9 digits in it, we will be requesting that from the legislature. We have made our considerable efforts to advise the sort of appropriations leaders and the leaders generally in the legislature that we are in extremis and that we have a significant need for new funding to support the colleges and universities at CSCU. I think that they are expecting that, and I anticipate that we will have a unique opportunity to expand the breadth of state support for what we do at CSCU this year. Somebody told me the other day, it's a shame that we always seem to be asking for money to deal with a crisis rather than just getting the state to acknowledge they should be paying more for higher education. But, we'll move toward greater state support any way we can, and currently asking for money to avoid having to do either more draconian tuition increases or reductions in our operating costs that are painful, or use of our system reserves. Those are other sort of short-term measures we could put in place. None of those, I don't think, alone can solve our problems, and so we are ultimately going to depend on state resources. So I'd be happy to take any questions about that. Again, I believe that the details of the CBAC agreement will become generally known, but I'm deferring to the Office of Labor Relations at the state OPM and not discussing their specific terms now.
Thank you. Any other comments on this subject of the program report, which we will again hear at the board meeting? If not, before we conclude,
You still have to do the CSUS program report. I mean, just
oh, I'm sorry.
a separate item.
I'm sorry.
Keith will do that one.
Is Keith? Oh, there he is. Okay, I was just going. Update on our program report, Keith, please. Thank
Sure.
you. And I didn't mean to overlook you at all, of course.
This will be brief. For those of you who aren't familiar, CSU 2020 long-term capital report, the universities from 2000 or FY09 to where the program was last funded, FY21, and 2 years for the colleges, FY20, FY15, and FY16. The list in front of you, it's all the projects that we've completed to date. We are required to legislatively submit annually a report. This is the format of the legislative requirement, this 21st report. In summary, most of these projects have not changed since you've received the last report because it's an overall summary of the program. But real brief on the last page, the available total funded to date, $1,069,500,000. Of those funds, we have committed $991 million, and we have expended $914 million. Since the last report, in the committed column, we've committed $47 million additional dollars. That's in that total, and also expended $41 million. And the significant projects, just a few of them to report on for you that are being completed or have just been complete. The School of Business at Southern has broken ground. It's a $52 million project that will be complete in about a year and a half. And I've spoken about it before. That is a net zero building, so it's going to generate as much energy as it consumes. It will be the first public net zero building in Connecticut. The Health and Human Services building at Southern, it's about ready to open. It'll be ready in September. It's just going through the final stages. The engineering classroom building at Central, that building was just opened. It's a wonderful facility, a $62 million facility. And our last project that'll be completed under the 2020 program is a Borough Library at Central, small addition and small renovation, $16 million project, and that is in the design phase right now. All the smaller amounts have been closed out on the spreadsheet, hopefully within the next year. Other than the business schools, the program will be closed. And we'll be looking to bond funds through general bond appropriations. If you have any questions, I could answer them, or thank you.
Questions by members? Keith, I think we have to go after now 2025 funding, bonding, et cetera, for new projects. I know we're going to need some at the colleges and certainly at the universities. This 2020 money, as I went through those numbers, practically everything is completed or nearing completion. So if we're going to grow, which I'd like to be able to do, one of the things we'll need to grow, of course, are more students so that we could provide programs for them and justify expansion of buildings that we have. But if there are no other questions before we adjourn, I would just like to congratulate a member of our committee, David Blitz, who has been named as a member of the Community Executive Board by the Connecticut Mirror, which is a pretty good deal since there are well over 100 applicants for the job, and our committee member and board member has been selected to be part of that. And congratulations, David, on behalf of our Finance Committee. I think I can speak well, and for our Board of Regents. Congratulations to you. We've got you shut off again, huh, David?
Very uncharacteristically. I appreciate that, that comment. And of course, the challenge for me is to say something interesting in 750 words or less. I've been trying.
It'll be difficult. Thank you. Thanks again. Are there other comments? I would entertain a motion then for adjournment. Is there such a motion? Thank you, David. Is there a second? Thank you, Joanne. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Your meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
See you in person next time.
Let us hope, yes.